the square. When we complete the square, we are going to have the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And our first step is to move your c. This is your c. So we're going to add 3 on both sides. So then we are left with x squared plus 10x equals 3. Now, step 2, you're going to take half of your b and square it. Remember, ax squared plus b. So 10 is your b. Half of 10 is 5. And it says to square it. So 5 squared is 25. Step 3 is you're going to add this 25 to each side. So we have x squared plus 10x. This is from the original problem. We're going to add the 25 on this side. And we're going to add the 25 to the 3. So 25 plus 3 will be 28. So I'll just rewrite 28. Okay, now the next step, we had x squared plus 10x plus 25 equals 28. Just rewriting this. It says to factor the left side. So we're going to factor this side here. And remember, when we factor, we end up with 2 binomials. And it always depends on this number in front here. If that's a 1, life is very easy. And we just have to find the factors of 25. That will add up to 10. So if you want to do some side work over here, factors of 25, 1 and 25, and 5 and 5. And which set of these will add up to 10? Well, 5 and 5 do. So we have x plus 5 and x plus 5. And again, this factoring is already discussed in a previous video. So if you need to review that, please go back. And we have equals 28. Now, we also could write this x plus 5 as 2 of them. So we could write x plus 5 squared, because there are 2 of these. And that brings us to the 5th step, is to take the square root of both sides, because we are going to solve this. And this goes back to another section where we solved quadratic equations. So we're going to square root both sides, which cancels that out. The parentheses will go away. We're left with x plus 5 equals the square root of 28. Remember, you want to put plus or minus. And we want to make sure that the 28 is simplified. So if we come over here and find the factors of 28, we want to find one that has a perfect square, which 4 does. So we're going to simplify this, and we're going to write x plus 5 equals plus or minus the square root of 4 times the square root of 7. Well, that's a 2, and then the square root of 7 does not go any farther. So now we have the radicals simplified. The last step to do is just subtract the 5. So our answer can be the plus minus 2 square root of 7 minus 5. Or, like I said, you can rewrite this another way. You could write negative 5 plus minus 2 square root of 7. So there's 2 answers, negative 5 plus this decimal and negative 5 minus this decimal. If I asked for decimal numbers, you would actually have to calculate this out. If I asked just for a simple radical, this would be the correct way to write it. Let's try another one. Without all the steps written out for you, you can refer back to it. The first step is to subtract your C. So we're going to subtract the 64. And now we're going to take half of our b. So half of 16 is 8, and we're going to square it. So 8 squared is 64, and we're going to add it to both sides. Now if you add 64 to negative 64, we're going to come back with 0. So we have x squared plus 16x plus 64 equals 0. Now the reason why we just ended up with exactly what we started with is because you can factor x squared plus 16x plus 64 right away. Because this equals 0, always check to see if you can factor it right away, because then you can minus, you can eliminate steps 1, 2, and you can go right to 3, which is just factoring. And if you forget to see if that factors, you go through the steps, you'll end up exactly with what you started with. So either way will work for you. All right, now that we have our equation, we need to factor this. So we're going to have two binomials. And of course, we're going to have x and x. We need to find the factors of 64. And again, 64 is kind of a big number. If you want to go through your calculator, do 64 divided by 1, 64 divided by 2, 64 divided by 3, which does not work, 4, 16, and we have 5 cannot go into it, 6 cannot go into it, 7 cannot, but 8 and 8. And which one of these pairs will add up to our b? These two. So we write x plus 8, x plus 8. And because they're the same, we can rewrite it as just 1 with a squared. And now we have to solve for x. So we need to get rid of the square root by square rooting. That cancels it out. And the square root of 0 is 0, so that's an easy one. You can actually solve it. And the last thing you need to do is subtract 8. Now, suppose you had a quadratic equation where you no longer have a 1 here. You can go through and simplify this first by dividing everything by 3. But just make sure that you can divide everything by 3, and all of those you can. So we'll go through, and don't forget you have to do this side as well. So now we're left with x squared. 6 divided by 3 is 2. 12 divided by 3 is 4. And 0 divided by 3 is 0. Now we can go through and complete the square. I'm going to try to see, can I factor this without having to do the first 2 steps? Can I factor this? So you have to take the factors of 4 and see if they will ever add up to negative 2. And they do not. So what we need to do is we need to complete the square by using all of the steps. So we're going to move our c over. And now we're going to take half of negative 2. So half of negative 2 is negative 1, and we got to square it. But remember, when you take negative 1 and you square it, it's actually a positive 1. So we're going to take the positive 1 and add it to both sides. And negative 4 plus 1 is negative 3. Now we need to factor this. And we're going to get the factors of 1, which is 1 and 1. And you can tell that they will not add up to negative 2. However, remember that the factors of positive 1 is also negative 1 and negative 1. If we add negative 1 and negative 1, we will get the negative 2. So don't forget the negatives over here. So x minus 1 equals negative 3. And we can write one of those, go over here, with a squared, which is the same thing. And now we need to solve it, so we need to get rid of the squared, cancel that out, the parentheses go away. And remember, you cannot have, well, first of all, let's put our plus or minus. You cannot have a square root of a negative number. And when you do that, that's actually an imaginary number. So we're going to pull the I out. And then it'll be just square root of 3. And now left would be to add 1. So x equals plus or minus. You can write it this way, or you can write it like this: 1 plus or minus. Or you can also do the square root of 3 and then I afterwards, which is what most of them look like. A plus or minus bi. So these two would be switched around. Let me just show you that. 1 plus or minus. Just make sure you don't put the I underneath the square root. So there is your answer. And let's go ahead and try one more. I noticed that I have a 2 out in front here. I can simplify the 12 and the 14 by dividing by 2. So we have x squared. 12 divided by 2 is 6. And 14 divided by 2 is 7. 0 divided by 2 is 0. Now check and make sure that you can't factor this, and I'm going to tell you right now, there's no way you can factor this and get a negative number here. So we're going to do all of the methods. Subtract the 7. We're going to take half of our b. So divide by 2, which is going to give us negative 3. And we're going to square it, which is a positive 9. And we're going to add this 9 to both sides. So plus 9, plus 9. So now we end up with x squared minus 6x plus 9. And negative 7 plus 9 is 2. Now we can go ahead and factor this. We're going to have an x here and an x here. We need to find the factors of 9. And see which pair of these will add up to a negative 6. I know that 3 plus 3 will give you a positive 6. So if I change this to negative 3 and negative 3, which still equals a positive 9, negative 3 plus negative 3 will also equal a negative 6. So we have negative 3 here and negative 3 here. We make one binomial with the squared, which is just another way of rewriting what we had up here. And now we're ready to solve. So we're going to square root both sides, which cancels the square, and the parentheses go away and you're left with x minus 3, plus or minus, because we're solving. I know the square root of 2 does not go down any farther, so we'll leave it how it is. And the last step would be to add 3 on both sides. And I'm going to go ahead and write it in the proper form, which would be 3 plus or minus square root of 2. So 2 answers again, 3 plus this decimal and 3 minus this decimal. And for now, you can leave your answer as a radical.